Good evening, TNT family. We are back with Dr. Stephen Ramrup, and we just continuing our program with Yellow Decode, and we're going to touch a little bit also on other issues, but we want to continue the discussion with what we're looking forward for from our government, new government that's in place there now. I took some hard work to really um, get this our new government elected, and we deeply appreciate seeing this landslide victory and seeing how people rejoicing. With that, Dr. Ramrup, I
Hi,
want to
hi.
welcome you back to UNC USA Yellow is the Code program.
Mhm.
And we had a good discussion last night. A lot of people reached out back to me and said they love the discussion and the topics that we discussed. And definitely, I really want to see this EMT program,
Right.
installed, under our new government, and I know that the structure is set in place for um, both the paid and unpaid citizens who will be participating, but they must get properly trained, and we want to see our doctors get some training also that who has been qualified by or say certification, but they has not been really trained.
Yes.
So I am hoping that somehow along the line that we could get some of these doctors to participate in this emergency medical response training
Yeah.
together alongside with those who are, EMTs on the ground there, so the doctors can really participate in the response and
Yeah.
get some experience there and also give some guidance.
Yeah.
Also working alongside, with the other experienced doctors in the hospital.
Yeah.
So I just want you, if you can share your perspective on the way I'm thinking, and
Yeah.
give
Well,
us some views on that.
surely. There are quite a number of doctors who are unemployed, who are going to be graduating this year again, all right, from UWI, and a lot of them had won scholarships, so they have to come back and work for the government. So we have a problem. Of course, I know that the Honorable Prime Minister wants to open back the Cuba Hospital, which obviously will take a number of those doctors and will be able to provide some services for the people of Trinidad and Tobago in that regard. But I am agreeing, and I had suggested, right, over the last few years, that some of those doctors could be asked, or at least to get involved and to understand two things. One, about this EMT, this emergency life support, emergency medical support I would
Yes,
say the
yes,
ambulance system. We call it the
yeah,
pre-hospital care.
yeah,
When the late Hamza, when Hamza Rafiq had actually was Minister of Health, okay, and we had actually started the EMS system. We used to call it EHS, right? And we started it in Trinidad and Tobago. I was sent by the government to Nova Scotia, where it all originated. Okay, and there where we went to the now defunct Queen Elizabeth Hospital, and I met with a number of the people there, the doctors and whatever, and we went through all the logistics. And we did actually travel in a backup vehicle, which was a pickup actually, which had all the advanced life support equipment. And this vehicle had a doctor, and the doctor was trained in advanced life support, cardiac life support, and trauma life support. And they would go behind when there is a call. For example, if there's an ambulance, if there's a heart attack patient or a very bad accident where someone is unconscious, the doctors will go right to the with the ambulance or just behind the ambulance, and they will assist in the field. And a number of lives were saved. And I know for a fact one of my colleagues, in Gulf City, in Gulfview. I don't know if you would know Dr. Mahabir. He had a heart attack at home. His wife was a doctor, is a doctor, and he didn't survive, because the problem is that by the time the ambulance reach and they can get the heart going by resuscitation. Now, of course, we don't use mouth to mouth resuscitation. We use the hands. And then when we got back the heart going, and when the heart starts to work, there must be a person who can be authorized or can actually continue that heart to beat until it reaches the hospital, where they can do reperfusion and then even stenting. And I know that Dr. Bodo had indicated in the manifesto that they are looking at putting in these cardiac centers, right, catheterization, etc., in all of our major hospitals, because we have a high incidence of heart disease. So yes, EMT basic is what we currently have out of ambulance. Now, remember, yesterday we were talking about we have to have these interministerial teams, and they don't have to be the ministers, they can be the parliamentary secretaries, or representatives, representing the minister, such as their assistants or their advisors or whatever. And we have to look at, for example, the whole question of EMT basic. There was a time when the fire services had EMT paramedics and they were trained, but still the legislation did not allow them to put up a drip. As you know, even midwives can put up a drip, but a lot of persons and registered nurses can do it, but they have to be authorized or what we call standing orders given by doctors who actually certify and cover them. I mean, this is really something that there are a lot of legislation that has to be reviewed, and therefore you have to have other ministers or representative of other ministries at the table. For example, one of the key things that we have to have, remember you spoke yesterday about where some of the vehicles that they are using to transport very ill patients, they are not up to international standards as to what they have to have. So therefore now Ministry of Transport, has to come in, the Ministry of Transport and Civil Aviation, right, has to come into the thing now. We have to now have specifications for ambulances that actually take patients from hospitals. If you look at some of the ambulances, you have these panel vans, and they are not standard issue for moving patients. They are very unstable, all right, and they're not within the international specifications. So there must be Department of Transport. In other countries, you have a Department of Transport in Canada, where I am sometimes, and they have these specifications. So all of these have to be improved. Then we have to have legislation as to giving the authority for training paramedics, and I had suggested that the minister Alexander in his ministry has the fire services under his supervision. And immediately when you look at some of the accidents that we have on the highway, you would see that there is a need for the fire services because of the removal of persons who are trapped in debris and rubble. The ambulance cannot do that. And because of the high velocity of some of our crashes, there are quite a lot of persons who are pinned behind steering wheels, and they have to have what they say the jaw of life to remove them. You see, so there must be a understanding that when the fire services, which they themselves are sometimes first on the scene with the police, and they must be also trained and to be paramedics, so that immediately you can actually, even while a guy is trapped, you can put up a drip for that guy and give him back fluid when he's losing a lot of blood from his femur, right, which is actually broken, and which can bleed up to 2 to 3 liters of blood, right, in an accident before you even remove that guy from the vehicle. So it's sometimes you can save lives by putting up a drip and resuscitating somebody even while they are being rescued and resuscitated. So there are quite a lot of things that we did even at that time. I said when the UNC under the late Mr. Pandey was in government, and I was part of that, because we actually, with Dr. Adam, we actually framed most of the standing orders that are still in place by the GMRTT, which has taken over the ambulance system on a contract with the Ministry of Health. So I think that we definitely have to upgrade our EMTs, and we have to hire some of those doctors. Even last night we talked about another route by which we can get doctors in a system that we need more doctors in. And I told you, I am trained in forensic medicine. In other words, then I am what you might want to call abroad, and you look at the television, like a medical examiner. Okay, so I can do autopsies, I can assist in death investigation, I can do legal analysis of people who have had possible medical negligence in hospital, because it's a forensic analysis. I'm an expert witness in court, etc., etc. So when you look at that, you have a lot of doctors who are afraid to go to court. So there's a lot of training that can be done. Doctors in forensic medicine, my university, when I left the University of Florida, they were willing to partner with Trinidad and Tobago to see if we can have some joint training programs, because as you know, quite a lot of those programs can be done virtually with the professors staying in Florida. And then when we have the actual manual workshops, we can have the rooms at DB campus, which is not being used at all. So we have doctors who can go into forensic psychology, forensic anthropology, forensics archaeology, forensics microbiology, forensics botany, forensics pathology. Now, we definitely need forensic pathologists. Right now in the Forensic Science Center, we don't have qualified forensic pathologists. You might have one. We have a lot of persons that they hired from India, right? And we have to, these are things that we have to look at the gap and start filling, because one of the most important things, right, in any sort of crime scene investigation is the scene or the death investigation on the site. Now, as you know, we have the old British system, the coroners and the DMO system, where the DMOs are called by the police to go and look at the body. The DMOs, who some of them are trained in some forensics, but we need to now have a hybrid system where you have forensic medicine or medical examiners who are now almost within the jurisdiction of some of the police stations, so that when there's a crime involving death, right, that death investigation can be conducted by a medical examiner, right, as an ongoing examination, rather than just by a visit by a DMO who certifies the body and orders its removal and takes some information about whether, the body, for example, there was a murder in DB recently, not too far from us. The guy was found in a drain, and his hand was tied, and he was shot a number of times on the chest. Right? In fact, that's my neighbor. It's our neighbor. The Honorable Prime Minister lives to the left of me if I'm facing the road, and they live 2 or 3 doors down. They used to live there anyway. So it's so close to home. But, when you go to the scene, you have to know that body was removed. It was removed from the place where it actually was shot, where he was actually shot, and removed and dumped in that area. So there are a lot of investigations that go in, and when you deal with death investigation, is you have to look, for example, at the body to see if there was any sort of evidence that would tell you, for example, whether there were little fragments of leaves or whatever from another area, you see? So there's doctors can be hired in that as well. So we have places where doctors can train, right, in forensics and all of those areas. We have in the ambulance system where they can assist in the pre-hospital care, right? So we do have possibilities for some of our young doctors to get involved in what we were saying.
Mr. Suman, can you mute your mic because I'm getting some, until you're ready to talk, because I'm getting some background from you. Okay.
Right. Hi, Mr. Singh.
Go ahead, Dr. Ramrup. Go ahead.
Yeah. Right. So we have now one of the things, as I said, we need to have Gary. One of the problems that we have had in the health sector with respect to moving things forward is what we call the accreditation standards, or the standards by which you expect the delivery of care to reach, right, when it comes to dealing with our patients and their relatives. In the time of the Honorable Prime Minister, when Honorable Pandey was in government, all right, that they had brought up the Patients' Rights Charter, right, and that was distributed to the public. One of the things that we need to look at is the marketing of the Patients' Rights Charter. It has to be something like on an app where anybody could just go on the phone and download the app and then click on the app and say, well, okay, this is what the Patients' Rights Charter expects of the providers of healthcare, whether it's public or private, to give to me as a patient or a relative of a patient. Okay, coming back to what you sent me yesterday about that patient with the IV line. So one of the things is that must be so easily accessible for persons in the public. So it's not just about having a Patients' Rights Charter. It's about managing the actual implementation of that charter, monitoring the impact of the charter and what is happening with it. So that's one. The second thing is that you have what is called accreditation standards. And one of the problems is that when I was interviewed for jobs in the North Central, I was interviewed for jobs in the Eastern Regional Health Authority. I was interviewed for CEO at Southwest Regional Health Authority, as well as the medical director and the executive medical director, or the director of health there. And every time they ask me questions and they ask me to present a PowerPoint presentation as to what I think would be needed. And they kept the PowerPoint presentation because when we talked about enterprise risk management yesterday, I gave them a whole slide on that, and I lost it because in a sense, when I left the interview, I gave them answers as to how they could have prevented or at least mitigated, right, against the impact of a lot of the problems that they had experienced. For example, the Southwest cyber hacking, right, hacking, and that was something that affected the ministry, and it still affects the Ministry of Health and some of the RHAs. So one of the things we have is what we call accreditation standards. So it means that everywhere a patient goes in a hospital, there's a certain standard of care that is expected, and that standard must be universal. So that when the ministers of health take office, they're going to be doing some work from tomorrow. I am hoping that they can have an integrated approach to, for example, all the chairmen of the boards, right? So that what you have is how it works. I don't know if the general public knows this, but the Ministry of Health has what we call a service level agreement under the Regional Health Authorities Act. There's something called a service level agreement, which is almost like a guide to all the RHAs for some of the key performance indicators. Yesterday, Mr. Singh talked about KPIs. That's what it is. So what the service level agreement does, it gives all the RHAs these key KPIs that they must actually align themselves to and deliver, right? And it must be monitored and measured by whom? It is the chief medical officer. So the chief medical officer, when that person is actually there, he has to have managerial skills. He has to be like a CEO that actually looks and brings all the chairmen of the board and the CEOs together and say, well, look, this is the service level agreement. Can you give me your dashboard as to this month, what you have achieved with respect to A, B, C, D, E, F? Tell me if it's red, yellow, and green. Now, those things must be done. If they were not done to any extent before, to some extent, they must be actually improved, because what you are trying to do here is to standardize care, because the only way that you can assess the quality of healthcare universally in Trinidad and Tobago is if everyone is trying to provide the same level of care, right? When you go to do an appendectomy in a hospital in Cuba or in San Fernando, in Sangre Grande, in Point Fortin, in Scarborough, right? The actual number of equipment, the procedure, right? The whole list of materials that are used, and all of those things must be actually recorded and clicked and checked so that everything there, right, is actually the same as much as possible, all things being equal, right? And that is very important when it comes to coding of procedures and eventual cost of procedures. So you have, for example, in the private sector, you have an appendectomy that might cost $10,000 in one nursing home, $15,000 in another nursing home, $20,000 in another nursing home. And when the patient submits a claim to the insurance company, what happens is that the insurance company wouldn't pay because they themselves have a maximum they will pay for that. So you have someone who would land up in a nursing home and pay $25,000 for the same appendectomy that he paid 10 in another facility, and then the insurance company will only give him 5 because in all of them they'll get 5 because that is what the insurance company has said. You see, so these so-called codes that should be there now it must be also in the public sector. So that when, for example, a patient claims negligence, or when somebody has a problem with any one of the delivery of care, and the CEOs and the investigation team run by the quality department goes to the investigation, they are able to qualitatively and quantitatively do a root cause analysis without putting blames on the actual surgeons or nurses or anyone. It's a systems approach to dealing with problems. And it's almost like a business approach that has to be implemented universally in all the RHAs. So I'm hoping that, and I'm appealing to the ministers of health that what they need to do now is to run it like a business, right? In the sense that you have to now task your chief medical officer, right, to monitor and to implement and to deliver and to roll out and manage these service level agreements to all the RHAs. All the chairmen of the board now must now take the strategic plans and develop and make sure and upgrade their strategic plans with the key performance indicators of just not the RHA, but also align themselves back to the national KPIs, which is your service level agreement, and ensure that they have the dashboards that they can report back to the minister via the chief medical officer at his monthly meetings with his boards. that is his chairman of his boards, right? The chairman, on the other hand, obviously will have to meet with the CEOs, but I'm talking about the political part of it, right? And of course, the management, the executive part will be the CEO and his board, the CEO and his managers. So these are some of the things that I think that, yes, you can achieve a lot through your manifesto, but I said yesterday, there are certain things that you have to institutionalize. And there are certain things that will be there long after you're gone. And these are the healthcare management components of a business, right? I mean, I'm not trying to push myself in anything, but I have an MBA in healthcare management. It's a Master's of Business Administration in Healthcare Management. What it does, it allows
Please
me as
lay
a
it out.
CEO.
Please lay it out. Don't hesitate.
Yeah,
Lay it
no,
out.
I mean, it allows me as a CEO to to remove the bullshit, right, from the proposals that are coming into your office as CEO or even chairman of a board. I can say, well, look, this is craziness. Because you have some doctors, for example, they are very good doctors, and they will come to the CEO and say, well, look, I want to get money, right, to buy 25 hips. See, we had a problem. And they come to the medical director. I was medical director at Southwest, and they will come to me and say, Dr. I'll take this up because we need to get money to replace 25 hips. And I will tell them, well, tell me something. You have been doing hips in this hospital for the last 15 years. And tell me, when you are asking for these hips and all this equipment to put in these hips, have you done an audit of the number of hips that you have done? Have you actually gone back and seen whether these hips are coming out of the hospital and returning to some sort of work or some sort of quality adjusted life years after? In other words, are you telling me that your hips is just, they're telling the news and the media that they're doing 25 hips a week, but it's not doing the 25 hips. Your metric, your KPI is not the number of hips you do, but your KPI is what is happening with the quality of life of the persons that you operate on. And if, for example, your physical therapy or your physiotherapy department is giving people appointments like 6 months down the line, that the social department cannot give them or get a crutch for them or a wheelchair, right? Then how are these persons getting back? You're just operating on them and sending them home. So if you go back now, you see quite a lot of persons in Trinidad and Tobago. And I was so happy when I saw in the manifesto that the UNC is saying now, I want to build up and improve the rehabilitation by setting up a rehabilitation hospital or rehabilitation system. And I think I wrote somewhere, I don't know if it was Facebook or otherwise, where it's not just a rehabilitation for strokes, because I think they were concentrating on strokes. You have to look at persons who have major surgery. You have to look at persons, for example, who have had cesarean section and are coming home. You have to look at persons who have cancer or actually need palliative care. Because a lot of these persons, for example, who have amputations due to diabetes, their homes don't have proper ramps. They don't have proper washrooms where they can sit down if they have one amputation. So what I'm suggesting is that in the manifesto, they said stroke rehabilitation. I'm suggesting that they should open that up to rehabilitation, right, of persons who have disabilities due to any whether surgical or medical cases. And I'm suggesting that they work very closely with the Ministry of Housing, the Ministry of Local and Rural Development, where they can actually identify these homes I said yesterday about what we call the enumeration districts, which is how they measure and they give people in the housing census where you have how many disabled persons and all of these things. It helps with disaster management. Because when the fire service and the military comes to a village, they don't know where the disabled persons are. They don't know where the single parents are. They don't know where the blind are. But it now is where yesterday you talked about, Gary, you talked about the community emergency response training. And when I was in ODPM, they sent us to Cuba. And we implemented a community alerting service, right, in Mayaro and Rio Claro. And it was a model which was supposed to be translated into the entire, all the municipalities, all the 14. But as far as I remember, when I left in 2017, it did not get done, although we had gotten some funding from the UNDP to roll that out. And what it was is that in Cuba, what it did is that they have these persons who are retired nurses, doctors, some of these people are school teachers, sports leaders, they're retired. So what they do, they give them these little radios, very cheap radios, right, that they are able to communicate with each other, right, in the village where they are. So when there's a flooding or when there is a disaster that happens in that little village, when the fire services come and the police come and the military comes, they don't go from house to house, because in some of the houses they might go to the people who are okay, they're healthy, they're young, but they will go to the homes where there are the persons who live alone, the old person with the stroke, the one of them who had the amputation yesterday, and nobody would know that except the people in the house. They don't share that with the rest of the village. But what happens is, if you have this team of persons who are able to communicate from the time the military or the rescue services go to that village, right? They contact the leader of that area and he will say, no, yesterday Stephen had an amputation. You need to get him out quickly because he is the one, right? And you go to that house first and you don't go down the line, because if you come there, you don't know. So there's a
Yeah, you,
science.
you, you don't go have to discuss it. See, like what happened is,
Yeah,
like we have some of our EMTs here.
yeah,
They have a blue light in their car,
yeah,
right? And they have a radio, and
yes,
they listen to the local calls, like from the
right,
fire service to the police, so they know
yes,
it's emergency response, and they will come on the scene.
yes,
They were certified EMTs,
yes,
and then the ambulance follows too. We do have a paramedic that follows the ambulance. So there
yes,
is, so the paramedics, we could get some of those new doctors
correct.
to do that for
Yeah.
experience.
At
You
least in the
know,
interim,
yeah.
in the interim, while we train the ambulance technicians and up to paramedics and intermediate at a later stage, because we
Yeah, we
definitely
should
have a
break in our
solution.
doctors like that. We should break in our
Absolutely.
doctors in a mixed
Yeah.
training.
We
So
had
that would help the
suggested it.
country.
Yeah, we had suggested it. I remember when we had a problem, we had a meeting at my home where we invited a lot of unemployed doctors. And because there was a time when they had a really real problem, and we had a meeting at my home here, and we had about 25 of the doctors. And when I offered that to them, I said, well, why we don't lobby to the government, to at least give you an attachment there. So at least in the meantime, you could get a little stipend, you could get some money, because some of these people didn't have money, right? I mean, salary, their parents spent so much money for them to go and do medicine. And when they came back, they didn't have a job. And it was really, really hard. So I said that might be an option. Some of them didn't want to do it, right? And so we have to actually now build up a culture, and that is something that has to be shared, and education in the medical school. We have to start looking at healthcare as a whole, rather than saying, well, I went to do medicine, I want to come back now, and I want to do my internship, and I want to be an orthopedic surgeon. Right now, those sort of things is that we have to start beginning to teach the guys in the medical school that there's forensic medicine. That's a big thing. So much crime in the Caribbean. You know what I mean? Look at all over the world. Look at what's happening in Guyana. So what is happening is it's happening all over the world and in the Caribbean. So there's job for forensic medicine people all over. So we have to get that in the medical school. So doctors can now come out there and say, well, yeah, I don't mind serving 6 months on an ambulance, right? At least not in the ambulance, but in the support back, like similar what you have the paramedic going behind in the backup vehicle, which is what I saw in Nova Scotia many years ago. And it could be done from tomorrow. In other words, and all the minister and them will have to do now is to look at the logistics, look at the possibilities, look at the unemployed doctors, upgrade the EMS service, and it's not a hard thing. I mean, it's wrong to say tomorrow. I agree, but it's something that could be a quick win. It could be a quick win.
I think this government, the PNM itself, lacks interest in anything that's good for the people. These people clearly was there for themselves, especially this administration. And we have a long history. We must repeat it. We have a very long history of those deliberately putting hurdles in the way of those who graduated and trying to help the country or anybody, whether we inside or outside the country. So, it's a relief to see the change of government, and we are hoping for the best. We want to give this new government all the necessary information. I know they need some time to settle down, but in the meantime, we would be preparing all of this information, and bringing your persons like yourself to be there to guide, this kind of
Yeah.
information here.
Well,
So it is absolutely necessary to have you on board,
yeah.
sharing
Gary, one of the
correction.
things that I mean, the reason why I don't have a job for 10 years is, I mean, I don't have to tell anybody why. All right, because I mean,
Right, right. But what I'm saying to you, look at the value, the
yeah,
capability of yourself, that the things
yeah,
that you could have done for the
yeah,
government that ended up looking so badly,
yeah.
and they refuse.
Correct,
They
and,
refuse.
and I think this is the point I'm trying to make. What I'm hoping that the UNC does this time around is that they don't have to take our recommendation and advice, because, as I said yesterday, Our ministers are very well qualified. They have a lot of experience, especially in health, right? And I am saying that they would have their own ideas of what they would like to do when they go in. They had a manifesto, which in my opinion is quite good. It was well researched. It has quite a lot of stuff. As I said, there are some things that I would probably just change a bit. One of them I told you was the fact that instead of having just a stroke rehabilitation program, it should be a rehabilitation program for all disabilities, which I just mentioned, right?
Right.
So
What
that,
we have here in the States, right? When they
yeah,
dismiss you from a hospital,
yeah,
even when they discharge you,
yes,
they are following up. The nurse is calling you. There's an everyday call.
right,
There's the ability to send
yeah,
a nurse to check your dressing
right,
and check your vitals, and
correct,
then there's communication, and all
yes,
that information is documented by the hospital.
right,
The emergency medical training was done by the hospital,
yeah,
there. So so it is all supervised and guided in the proper way. There's
right,
proper classes, and I got these people to help. I mean,
yeah,
you have traveled, you have studied overseas, you've been, you know the deal, how it is. Dr.
yes,
Gopi Singh knows the deal.
yeah,
Dr. Lakram Budu knows how this thing should work.
yeah,
And, it's just a matter of getting the legislation, the structure in place, the management structure in place to
yeah,
make it happen.
yeah,
And we start off with our full set of training school, to guide persons in the right way how to do this, and because the lives you're playing with here, and every second counts, and you have to be able to respond. Definitely, I want to see this happen under this government within the first 5 years.
yeah.
Within
But
the
what
first
I'm
five
what
years.
I'm suggesting, Gary, is that what we had spoken to yesterday, right, is that one of the reasons why, right? I mean, I have been writing letters to the ministry, right? I am a diabetic, right? And I was having a lot of problems with the management of my diabetes in Trinidad, right? In fact, it got so bad that I have a cardiac problem, which has reached a 70% block in my main artery. All right, I'm a doctor. I saw endocrinologists here, and I'm not saying anybody was bad. But when I went abroad, thanks to my daughters, they are citizens of Canada, I saw some doctors there, and I was placed on Ozempic because it's cardioprotective. I was placed on Tresiba because they said the insulin is causing me to have belly, right? My belly was saying. So they put me on Tresiba. They changed my medicine from Janumet and all of these things to Jardiance, which also protects the heart and the kidney. What I'm trying to say is that there are medicines that are available, right, there, right, that actually brought my sugar totally under control, right? My weight loss is now 40 pounds in the last 6 months with the Ozempic and the Tresiba and the Jardiance. I have lost weight. My belly has gone right now. I can even go from size 34 to 32. Now, I'm giving this example because what I'm trying to say is that there are medications. And I've been writing the chief medical officer, right, about Ozempic and all of these drugs. And there was a
Mhm.
time when all I could buy in Trinidad was Trulicity, right? Ozempic is now being sold illegally in Trinidad and Tobago at exorbitant costs, right? Yesterday, right, I had a patient, who had a hip surgery recently. And because of his spine now getting a problem, he's overweight. I had to recommend a local provider supply him with Wegovy,
We
right?
go, yeah.
Which is being sold at $2,500, $3,000. And my I get Wegovy from my daughters, from in Canada, and we got it for 400 US Canadian, because they don't pay for the Wegovy in Canada, but the insurance pays for the Ozempic, right? But Wegovy is a better drug, although it's the same semaglutide, for persons who wish to lose the weight, whereas Ozempic is designed mostly for persons with diabetes. So, the thing is, Tresiba, for example, is a beautiful drug. Just by sticking myself at 24 units at night, I have been able to cut out all the insulin. I mean, today I ate 4 starch mangoes, and my sugar, I mean, I knew it, unadulterated. And I tell you, my sugar did not go up to 400. It went up to 205. I'm getting up at a fasting now of 109, 95. My HbA1c is plumb where it's supposed to be. So the thing about it is that he didn't listen. He never responded. There was no way that you could have gotten to the minister, the ex-minister of health. So therefore, what I'm asking and I'm hoping is that, I mean, this forum, I love, I'm glad to join it, because I get a chance. I can't. Facebook is the only thing you could actually now say something. There is no method where you can write a minister. I can tell you right now, because that bureaucracy, it is crazy. Before the minister even gets the letter, it goes through so many channels. Sometimes they don't even get it, right? So, and then they're so busy. Ministers, as a CEO of ODPM, you couldn't read all the letters. You had to have your secretary read the letter and then sort of flag as a CEO and a minister as a CEO. You just can't go through every piece of correspondence. It has to be done by some other people because that's the reality. So having an access, having a channel like this, right, where from time to time information gets to them. And now we have AI. Mr. Singh spoke about AI. When you have an app that somebody could actually, I talked about the patient's charter, right? The patient's rights charter. Now that is something that the government should have that as an app they could download, so that Stephen Ramrup, when he goes to Southwest, he goes in the hospital, he has chronic diabetes, he can click on it, right? And he can see what that charter allows him. So if a nurse comes out and buffs him and says, oh, no, go from here, that is wrong. And even customer service is a standard because it actually adds to the holistic care of the person. And that is so important. If somebody doesn't wheel me out, even if I had just a ganglion removed from my orthopedic clinic and I don't get wheeled out on a wheelchair when I do the surgery, right, to my car outside or whatever, that is, again, not proper standards. And these are simple things. Yesterday, we talked about the disabled car park system where the Ministry of Works have to streamline that and law enforcement have to enforce it with the private providers. You see, where somebody parks in a person who is parked in front of a mall or something and they parked in a disabled car park, that's a big issue. And it's something that raises our level, right, or social, the fabric of our country by doing these things. So these are the simple things. Access to not necessarily the ministers. I think the Honorable Prime Minister has actually put in a very good system with the parliamentary secretaries, where these are persons who might be more accessible to us rather than the ministers themselves. So I'm hoping that, Gary, that we can actually now engage some of the parliamentary secretaries via a channel. As I said, they don't have to take our recommendations, but at least we can actually give our opinions,
I think, Doc, you're speaking to something like this. If you could see my phone.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me see it. I'm not seeing.
Hold on. Okay, go ahead.
You see the phone there?
Yeah, yes.
Mount Sinai Medical Center.
Yes.
Raise it up a little higher. More. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Yes.
That's the my chart. That's the my chart.
Yeah.
We're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And it tells you everything, So when I go in New York, I would go LA.
Yeah.
If I had to go to a hospital, they could see everything.
Yeah. I walked into a lab on Wednesday, right? And they did my laboratory test. And when I went to the doctor 2 days after, I said, well, I don't have the result. He goes online. Yeah. He types two little things. And I say, oh, I have it. Don't worry. Amazing, isn't it? And I mean, that is, Trinidad and Tobago, 1.3, 1.4 million people, such a small country. Come on.
That's like
what I'm saying is, what I can't understand is so many of our people have lived overseas. So many of our people travel back and forth, and now not much saying anything at all.
Well, I think the last 10 years is an example of a government that actually only allowed few people to talk, right? And that's not a problem. In terms of the messaging, it's the way to go. And I hope that the current
I see that clearly as a big problem because Trinidad and Tobago belongs to the. But Doc, I want to let you know that this platform, we will continue as much as you need it here. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, but it's frustrating. I mean, it reaches a stage where if I'm not given an opportunity to help this government, I'm going to leave. I mean, it's as simple as that. I have opportunities that I can go abroad and live with my daughters, and I might take it if they don't give me a chance to help in any way, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Luckily, I think I made that decision 10 years ago or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
I came out here because I didn't see no hope for the country. As an economist background, I saw no hope for Trinidad for the longest while.
Yeah.
But what was happening with the oil and gas situation, and the loss in revenues and the long-term impact of non-revenue generating foreign exchange area, it was horrible. I mean, it's just a matter of a few years under UNC versus PNM, and it's within 2 years, you couldn't get foreign exchange again.
Yes.
In the, let's say, 2011, 12, 13, 14, you could get as much as you want. You could just order the bank. I used to order, my bank gave me a 25,000 US. I need to travel overseas, pay a bill here, and they get it before you travel. Now to get 200 for the week,
Yeah.
where is that incorporated? That could pay taxi fare. That's it.
Right. I'm going to bring back Vid here. I sent him, but I'm not sure he could have joined. But I'm going to bring him back either tomorrow or whenever he can come back. He had taken on the First Citizen banks and all the banking industry in Trinidad very heavily, with some articles there.
Yeah.
But listen, the burden has been lifted. We just have to clean out the cobweb now.
Yeah.
But
And
there's too much cobweb, Gary. There is too
So well,
much
it's
cobweb.
been there. Some very thick. You have some giant spiders there.
You have to be changing rooms often. But I'll
I
just
am.
like to go one step further what Doc was mentioning about, medication. As I tell you now, I had the opportunity to work with Mount Sinai in development, my AI and healthcare.
Yeah.
So you do an MRI now, the first line of reading is the AI.
Yes.
It reads it for the radiologist.
Yes.
He just comes in and confirms.
Yes.
So what happens is that most of the MRIs at Mount Sinai is done in the night.
Yes.
First thing in the morning, doctor has all the reports
Yeah.
already read.
Yeah.
He just confirming. Now he told me my neurologist, who is the head of department at Mount Sinai here in Miami.
Yes.
He said before, just 2 years ago, the maximum amount of the success rate then of this thing was only 78%.
Yes.
In 2 years, it has gone up to 94% accuracy. Check how that has replaced so much human errors.
Yes.
And not only that, the AI is going a step further.
Yes.
He was saying that we had, as a team, we went in the cardiology section at the Mount Sinai here, and they show you how the AI is generating the report. It's telling you now, after the person has had whatever cardiac, intervention they have had, it's telling you what are the medications you're supposed to assign for that person. So it's like a end-to-end, format of things. So telling you the medication, like, okay, your heart is not pumping enough blood. You need to be in something called Entresto.
All right.
That strengthens the heart. When you have a heart, it starts to strengthen the muscles and so on. No, that was great. Then it tells you, but if you're diabetic, you need to take Faxiga. So Faxiga, Entresto, sort of one counteract the kidneys if you're diabetic, and Entresto will work in tandem. Don't you mentioned the Wegovy and all these,
Yes.
these drugs. It tells you from a beginning point to an end point after you have had cardiac surgery or neurological disorders or whatever you have. It tells you the solution as well, which is the prescription. And that is the end game. That is the outcome of, really interacting with AI and medicine. It just doesn't stop at the point where you could just read the MRI. No, it goes further than that. So it has eliminated a lot of guesswork. It has improved the efficiency. It has improved accuracy. It has improved productivity. You can do a lot more now than before. It doesn't take you much longer to deal with a patient anymore, where you have to spend an hour and so you're doing it in 15 minutes or less.
Yes.
And then you could have, if you have good qualified nurses, they can even do that. The doctor just, countersigns that, yes, this is the treatment and that is the correct medication. And he goes about his business.
Yes.
So doctors basically getting employed to do what they do best, rather than be bogged down with, so many intermediate, trying to deal with not so important things, but let's say intermediate level things.
Yes.
So that is what building the efficiency in the system, and things like reading mammograms, and this is routine now.
Yeah.
With AI.
And it is. As I said, I have the personal experience with that in my own heart, because just recently I was in Canada, and my insurance agent, AdMed, sent me a WhatsApp right, which was like on the Wednesday, and said my admit is expiring. The policy is expiring on the Friday. I never got any notice about it before. And when she told me that, well, I was coming in on the Sunday. So I wrote the check on the Monday. And then I got an email about a week after I saw the check was cashed. It came out of my account, right, from Maritime. And they said, well, no, because I did not pay, my policy has lapsed. So I have to apply for reinstatement. And therefore, I have to do over a medical. So when they did the medical, I went by a doctor, my friend, one of the doctors, we did the medical, and I sent my reports from Canada and Trinidad, the angiogram or whatever. The underwriter wrote back and said, through the agent, that my policy cannot be renewed. And that's it. That was the end of it, after paying admit for like almost 17 years without a claim. So what
in
was
such a that's Trinidad for you, right? In such a short period of time.
What was
You know,
interesting
and
is that although what they almost tried to do was to actually, once I missed that payment by 1-2 days, right? They took the opportunity to put that into lapse, and right away for reinstatement, they went at my medical. Now, what was pretty interesting is we are currently trying to get an attorney to question the advice to the underwriters, one of the pre-action protocol letters, because the American Cardiac Association, right, they have these when I look at some of my colleagues, I have a friend with an 100% block, and he's going to have surgery next 2 weeks in Trinidad. And what they did is they just saw the block in the anterior descending artery, the left anterior descending artery, which is called the widower's artery. I have a 70% block, right? But what is interesting is that when I did mine, they injected me with the heparin, and they measured what we call the FFR and the IFR. Now, it is very important. This is basically what we call the fractional flow reserve and the instantaneous wave-free ratio. Now, these are the actual flow rates that are measured before and after. And it is that they use, right? And mine is, whenever you do a blood test, there's a range. Well, mine is just on the under, in the normal range, just under the normal range. And 70% is the limit at which now the cardiologist will say, okay, if it's more, if you have symptoms, you either stent when they come in, or you do cabbage, which is the heart surgery, right? 70% is like the borderline, So they treat me on medicine, and they said, if you behave yourself and you lose your weight and you use your medicine and you bring your LDL down, you can, you just don't go and get more plaques there again, and you're good to go, right? All things being equal, of course. Mm-hmm. So it is amazing that I'm positive that the cardiologists or whoever advised the underwriters don't have a clue as to some of the standards that are required by the American Heart Association to assess those flows. And when I look at some of the angiograms that are done in Trinidad, they don't have those flows. I looked at it and they never measured those flows. So you see, the standard of care that we have in Trinidad and Tobago, we need, right, the people who are in government, right? We need to set the standards. You know how quality is measured in our healthcare system? The Ministry of Health, right, with the RHAs, measures their own quality and comes up with these quality awards. It's amazing, right? So what it is, you don't have an independent quality, assurance, committee which is set up. So I am hoping, that Dr. Richard and Dr. Lakram Bodo set the bar. You have a patient's right charter, encourage a cross-section of the community. You do that for many other things. Your medical board, you did that for. Set up an independent quality healthcare assurance board or committee or whatever you want to do, right? An association. Sponsor it, right? Have a government representative there and let them begin to measure as much as possible both private and public healthcare institutions. We can't go into public healthcare institutions to get any freedom of information. Private healthcare institutions to get freedom of information, medicals and reports to assess. So these are some of the things that we have to improve. And the last thing that I probably want to recommend tonight is, I don't know if you know, my son is a doctor. He's in ear, nose, and throat. In fact, right now they're having a conference at the Hyatt this week. And there is something called, Mr. Singh, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Now, in Trinidad and Tobago, my son, right, he speaks with his officers, he speaks with his junior officers and he speaks with the senior officers. They share a lot of information. There are patients who send information to me on x-rays and MRIs on my WhatsApp, on emails. And in Trinidad and Tobago, there is some legislation that I know was proposed. I'm not sure of the extent of it, but we need to ensure now that the movement of information, now that we are talking about AI, right, is a little more protected, right, in terms of the legislation similar to what we have, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act that you have in the US, right, is similar to that in Trinidad, right? I think the government need to look into what we have in place, right, and see if we can strengthen that, because movement of information, and you talked about MRI, and the fact that AI can give you a much faster report in a cloud, right? I even wrote about MRIs, right? As far back as when I was medical director at San Fernando Hospital. And I said, listen, and this is data-driven. Gary, you talked about data-driven, right? We said a hospital, for example, like San Fernando Hospital, right, they would require 60 to 70% of the MRIs and the CT scans, right, to be done as electives. In other words, then clinics, doctors are requesting them from the clinic. So they are elective, and the other 20 to 30% are emergencies. You come in the night, you have an accident, and they do a CT scan. So the machine is doing both elective and emergencies. Suffice to say, it is overwhelmed by emergencies alone. And when you see the machine, falling down after, not having any scheduled, right, maintenance, right? It doesn't have any sort of maintenance program where you have, both scheduled as well as, right, emergency maintenance mitigation programs. Parts have to be imported. The machine loses its, it's what we should say. The technology changes every 5 years, so that when you now go back for that part, it's a big problem to get it in. The machine has a downtime, so now you have a problem now with it. So I had suggested even then that you do your electives. You have 6 private providers. You manage the process. You don't just give a contract and say, just do it. No, you have to have someone like an inspectorate almost to go and say, well, look, I am going to manage this contract. I'm a contract manager, right? And I'm saying, listen, you do this for me for X amount of dollars, right? And you standardize that across the board, so you don't have price gouging. You set up your standard of care that you expect your patient to have. You bring up the patient's right charter. You say, this is what they have. They have to have a waiting room. They have to have a proper screening process. They have to have a proper referral. They have to have a stamp from the hospital. And your electives can be done. And it's not just the cost. You don't have to have workers to see about your machine. You don't have to pay people overtime. You don't have to pay them, salaries, because you are now buying that service from a private provider at a reasonable cost. Because when you check your cost in the hospital with all of those things, it's more. Now, this is something, it's evidence-based. As I said, I am looking at journals of healthcare management. That's what we do when we are in a university. That's what we do when we do our MBA in healthcare management. It's a recommendation that will save the country millions of dollars, but it also allows persons who are coming into the health sector to get a faster service at less cost to the government. What it needs, however, is trained managers. Your managers must not be politically appointed. They must be persons who are trained in management, right? And that goes for the CEO.
Trained and qualified, not party card associated.
The chairman of the board, fine, but not the CEO, not the managers who are going to be there. So you have to make sure that they can manage contracts, so that when they go now and they look at what is happening at X private sector, X private, and everything is standardized, then you can pay a bill because you know you're getting your service that you want. And you can manage it, and you don't have to lose money by oneness. I'm telling you, well, when they come in, they have to do this blood test, and while he was on the table, he needed to get this, and then the bill is not 5,000, it's 10,000. No. That is price gouging. It occurred when I was medical director. It happened there because the management at the Southwest did not put the executive medical director at the time. It was a PNM government. They didn't put in place, right, the management expertise to manage contracts. So what happened is that it was not my purview. I was the medical director. All I had to do was somebody had a problem on the head, right? And I could not get the service in the hospital. That person was going to die, right? I was able to get the approval by the CEO to send them to a nursing home and private, and they would get it and they will live, because the service is sitting there doing nothing, right? In a private nursing home, right, which is like about 1 kilometer or less away from a big hospital where the machine is not working. And in my case, the doctors were on strike, and they would have lived because of that. So these are some of the things that it means that you have to put in place. It's not just what you offer in the manifesto, but it's how you're going to be supporting that, right, when you're going to be delivering that healthcare. We talked about service level agreement. We talked about key performance indicators. We talked about strategic plans which are going to be standardized across the board. We talked about accreditation standards. We talked about the coding of procedures. So you have what is called a common procedural terminology for all operations. They call it the CPT codes, right? It's using these codes now. You can code every single procedure, so that when a man says he has an appendectomy, he has an appendectomy. If he said that he had a ruptured appendectomy, well, then that's a code appendectomy plus a rupture. So that means that he will spend more time in his surgery, he will use more gauze, he will use more drainage, and he will use more antibiotics in the ward. And you expect that because he was coded as an appendectomy plus a rupture. You see? So this has to be standardized. So what is happening at Sangre Grande is the same as what is happening at Point, at San Fernando, Port of Spain, and Scarborough. And that is what we need.
Quite agree with you, Doc. But one of the first things with all of this we have lined up is that you must benchmark and start somewhere.
Correct.
If you don't benchmark, you don't know. You'll be same thing as you said, you'll be guessing. Yes. How do you measure whether you are performing good or better or the best? If you don't know what your benchmark is, then you set up your metrics, your KPI, and your strategic goals.
Yes.
Once you have those aligned, you can start to measure.
Yes.
And once you can start to measure based on your data, you can tell whether you're doing good, better, or the best you can do.
So then you can come back to the nation after 5 years and say, look, this is what I did. Because you know where you started, right? You know what are your strategic goals.
Every year.
It's not just in one region, it's throughout the country. And therefore you're saying, well, this is where we want to go, and this is where we have reached. We have managed to say we have done 500 hip operations for the population. And out of those, 80% of those have come back and returned to work within 3 months.
So that is the outcomes, the patient outcomes.
Right.
So this is how you measure. This is how you have to measure something.
Yes.
And
so you don't say my metric is I did 500 operations, so therefore I want money to buy 500 more hips.
that doesn't justify anything.
So that is the headache.
These guys wanted the money for themselves. They didn't know what they're doing. They didn't care to know. They didn't want no advice. And they could bully and threaten anybody, and we could not say nothing, right? Everybody. I mean, just imagine they lock everybody family outside the country and you can't say nothing. I don't know. That was a reason to riot for me.
I called. I know that it was said on the platform, and I hope that the ministers of health would get into it as soon as possible. I am calling for an audit of the handling
management of
COVID-19 because we had a serious problem with respect to the reporting of deaths, by the epidemiologists and all of those who were involved. And I am questioning whether or not it was true, because we were looking. I mean, I was in the community. I was a doctor, so I was able to move around. I had set up during the COVID what is called a home care program. I hired over 25 patient care assistants and registered nurses who worked privately with me. And we used to go and do home visits, and we would manage a number of these patients at home. All right, because they couldn't access hospital. A lot of them had chronic diseases. Some of them needed palliative care. Some of them had emergency operations, and they had to come home because of the bed situation and the COVID situation. So listen, we did, and I have my data to show that there was a death rate that was not in keeping with what we were seeing that was reported. So I'm hoping that now everybody dies in Trinidad. They're supposed to have a code in accordance with the ICD-10 coding. That death certification is supposed to be submitted. As you know, you register a death, it goes to the ministry, right? It is going to the registrar of deaths, and it is not filed, right? So therefore, there must be information of the death certificate of all persons who died during that period. And I'm hoping.
Speaking of that, Doc, I have something to add. Go ahead. I'm going to add when you go ahead.
So I am hoping that we, and if it is just to actually go through the coding to see how our physicians coded the deaths. right? Because there was specific coding for COVID. And again, I'm not boasting, but I am trained as a forensic medicine and forensic and legal medicine specialist to go through that, right, and look at the codes and give you a very, very accurate forensic analysis of what went on with every single death. Now, these are things that we need to do. You don't have to import people to do it. I can do it with a team, and we can get it done. And it's something that can be done very quickly.
The data can bear that out easily and quickly and precisely too.
Correct.
Yeah. But could it be that the doctors were instructed to write the death certificate in the way they did?
Well, one of the problems that we had universally, it wasn't in Trinidad and Tobago, as I told you, because of my networking from the university of where I did my forensic medicine, and because in ODPM, when I was a subject matter expert, I had the opportunity to go to Geneva, and as part of that engagement, we had a meeting with WHO at the time, and we had a number of our key stakeholders who were at the University of Oxford, who were at the University of the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, and WHO and PAHO. And what we did is that we had a network that we kept alive with some of us. And what we did is through the COVID, we kept in tune. We shared data and whatever. And we have pretty good data that showed that throughout the world there were errors. There were errors in coding, and it happened with all major diseases. It happened many years ago when they had the bubonic plague and all those other things, because they had documentation. And sometimes when you go through some of this old documentation, you realize you miss large populations. For example, in the continent of Africa, there were quite a lot of unreported deaths, right? Even in the Caribbean, right? In some cases. So what happened is that you have to go through and see all of those reports, and it is universally a problem. In fact, even right now, when you look at we had our Caribbean Medical Legal Conference in Barbados a couple of years before. This year it was I couldn't go. It was in Grenada, right? I think next year, I can't remember where it's going to be, in Jamaica or one of these countries. But we looked at some of these codes, right, that doctors in Trinidad and Tobago and other countries were coding deaths, for example, and they were wrong. Because somehow or the other, when they train us as doctors, we have a big problem with doctors who are signing death certificates in hospital. And I remember when I was medical director, what I used to do every morning when I go to work, I used to ask my the medical records department to bring 10 notes at random. Just pull 10 notes at random for me. And what I used to do is I used to go through these notes and look at the discharge summary and also the certification of death, which had to be done inside of the note. And we used to have almost like a 70 to 80%, right, of wrong death certification. So it's not something that they are trained to do. I think it's something they would have gone through a short course in university and medical school. But this needs training, and doctors on a daily basis, right, improper diagnoses, right, in terms of death certification. A lot of times, as you know, there's cause of death, manner of death, and mechanism of death, right? Cause of death is, for example, a man take a cutlass and cut off your head, right? It's a chop wound. The manner of death is obviously either suicide, homicide, or intentional, right? So in that case, that would have been homicide, right? But in terms of the mechanism, it would have been loss of blood and hypovolemic shock due to loss of blood from the head, and neurogenic shock because they cut off the head. So when doctors write death certification, they don't write, they mix up mechanism and manner, you see? So all of these things is a problem. And I think that the ministers of health, right, would have to ensure that we begin now to code going forward properly, so that when we go back now and look at a retrospective analysis of coding, we can begin to look at our problems. Then again, it's a universal problem, all right, because of lack of training. I don't think it was deliberate. I don't think they gave the doctors the messaging, but I think the messaging was complex in the sense that it was not a universal messaging. In other words, then there was no training workshops, even virtual, that would have gone. I was demanding that on Facebook. As I told you, the only forum I had to ask for these things was Facebook. There was no other way during the COVID at all. You couldn't pick up a phone or send an email because nobody responded to you in that last 10 years. So we were asking for proper coding. In fact, I remember Dr. Fuad Khan, who was an ex-minister of health, kept asking, right, about coding. He asked about the death rate, and we were questioning it on Facebook. But of course, that's not a place where you could engage and have information flow back and forth, right? So it was a problem. So I don't think it was deliberate messaging. I just think the messaging was chaotic. There was no training programs. There were no audit. Like how I used to audit the notes when I go as medical director. When I worked as medical director, I used to pull these random notes. There was none of that. There was no audit of what was happening in terms of that in the hospitals. Nobody was actually pulling those notes and saying, "Well, look, hey, my God, he made a problem. The person had a myocardial infarction, but they also had the COVID virus. The COVID didn't kill him; it was the heart attack that killed him. So then they put COVID there now, and he's put as a COVID case. If you know what I mean, yes."
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you bounce your foot, it was COVID in Trinidad. They wait because I think they were getting some kind of, either maybe they were getting money based on the numbers.
Yeah, right.
But I had a situation where a gentleman, somebody I'm familiar with, he was taken to Sandy Grande Hospital. He had a little drinking problem and stuff like that, so they take him there for treatment and whatever it is. He disappeared from the Sandy Grande Hospital, ended up being found dead on Manzolina Beach, never made it to the water, had a laceration on his head, and the doctor declared him dead of drowning.
Right.
As the cause of, he never make it in the water. Somebody hit him over the head, and he fell on the beach. They took his money or whatever it is they do. And that was the death certificate. They were going back and forth, back and forth. The body was moving back and forth from Port of Spain and Arima and whatever place they have there. I don't know the system there to get an autopsy done. And they just decided to close it up as drowning.
Yeah.
Just imagine that, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, what you're saying there, it's a very important information. To be brought to the public domain that a person dies suddenly, they declare heart attack without investigation.
Yes, and especially during a pandemic, it's more important because it's a time when you can falsely increase the numbers or decrease the numbers or hide the numbers if you're not. And again, it's who does it. You can't blame the doctors. Remember yesterday we talked about the tool that I would like to see implemented in all of our RHAs and our public health system. That is like the health centers and all this, called enterprise risk management in healthcare. Right? I think it's a universally accepted tool. It links back to the standard, the ISO standards of coding. It links back to the common procedural terminology that we can invent. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's there for us to use. And then, of course, I know that you know about the ISO standards, right? Where you have, for example, quality healthcare or quality management systems, the QMS system, right? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. The ISO standards are there. So the Bureau of Standards and the Ministry of Health have to sit down together, implement the QMS, right? Get your accreditation standards sorted out. Create your KPIs, make sure you have your SLE, your service level agreement implemented in all RHAs through the system of having the CMO meet with the CEOs or meet with the chairman, and the minister meet with the chairman. The minister meets with the chairs of the boards. The CMO meets with the CEOs, right? Because they are the managerial team. The executive team takes it back to the ministers and say, well, look, this is where we need to go. That has to work. That system must be impeccable, right? And you must have someone advising the ministers, like me or anybody similar to me, that actually will be able to pull everything together and get your strategic goals sorted out, right? You're looking at getting all your strategic plans in order. These things are important. They sound like things that you don't have to do, but these are big things in businesses. It's a business process that have to be put in, and when you have lawsuits due to problems like negligence, where you are blaming people, the first thing that the public and the CEO and everybody in a health sector do is they blame the nurse, they blame the doctor, right? But a lot of times when you look at it, it's a systems-based problem. Right? So the enterprise risk management does not cast blame on the provider. It actually is a system-wide analysis, right, of the operations of all the risk-based operations in the hospital, from financial, not just clinical, financial, management, infrastructural. There are 8 components of the analysis. You understand?
Well, I'm hoping that we set the right structure in place, because this is lives. This is not a car or some other kind of machinery here that we can afford to be careless with. And say, okay, all right, well then, they file a lawsuit and make a settlement. The person is dead. The damages is done. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we can build that sort of infrastructure where the population sees clearly. I intend to utilize this channel here to give the government the the credit for the job performed and the things that we done, so that the population is properly educated. And probably have you come back a few times, and whoever others to come back on this channel here, so that we broadcast where we took the healthcare system from and what we put it in place, so the population is properly educated. By the next time the next 5 years come, the country must be properly informed and educated. I mean, they're going to experience it personally, because they're going to see
Yeah.
what level of treatment they're getting, but also we want it documented,
Yeah.
visually, black and white, any which way you can. Social media, all of this must be laid out by the end of the term for the government.
Yeah.
This accomplishment must be documented well.
Well, I must say, Gary, that I mean, I worked in the health sector for a long time. I mean, as a 20-year-old to almost 55 years old, and I must say that we have a good health sector. One of the things I just don't want us to take away from this chart is that we have quite a lot of competent people who work in the system. It's a very good healthcare system. And when I was CEO, when I was medical director, I acted as CEO a number of times and executive medical director. And I must say that that you only heard the bad things, right? You're not hearing the good things. And I think that what I'm trying to say here now is how our government, the UNC government now, can take it from where it is. And Mr. Singh talked about benchmarking. Yes, take it from where it is now and improve it so much and bring it into the 4th industrial age. I mean, people are saying that the grannies, don't use phones. But I can tell you, if you go down in a street, every single granny has a phone. They mightn't be able to go into the intricacies of the phone, but they have a phone, right? And I think that even a child now, I mean, my little girl you saw here yesterday, my grandchild, she's just 1 year and 4 months and 6 months, and she's using a finger already to go on a little iPad and click a program and open it. Imagine that. So the thing about it is that I don't think that we must be scared of having these little apps where people in the house, and you have a younger population, Generation Z, they are here in the home, right? You have a lot of young persons who will be looking for jobs, people who are party supporters who are looking for little jobs to go in the communities with agencies like the Red Cross and the community-based organizations, and go into some of the homes who are disabled, right? Go in with contractors who are hired by the local government and start to do a reinforcement and a reconstruction of their homes to mitigate their structures, to make them better suited for flooding, for water level rise, putting electrical plugs higher up, building ramps for the persons who have had amputation. Right. These are things that has to be done.
We will have to have some kind of sort of cottage meeting type of thing going on, that where you engage the community. You let the family know how the young children can assist the elderly in what we're looking for, what we need from them. Because I don't clearly see it happening right now in Trinidad. The young people is in their own world, and they're using social media, the technology to play the whatever thing they want to get involved with, but they're not involved in the basic family life structure.
There are a lot of persons who are. I mean, I've been a Rotary Club member since 1986, right? I am what you call a district governor, past governor, who is in charge of Rotary Clubs from Antigua to French Guyana in the east, Aruba and Curacao and Bonaire in the west, including Guyana and Suriname. I led that organization in the Caribbean in 2012, 2013. I'm what you call a past governor, member of the council. And we have been working with communities all over the Caribbean. This is what I did. We just had a conference in the Hyatt last week, right, for 5 days. And I was in charge of logistics in terms of bringing these people, 450 Rotarians, leaders from all over the Caribbean. And we have been working in communities doing just this. We have been actually going into some of the communities and having young people in sports groups and sports association and religious organizations. They're helping the older people in some of our communities in the Caribbean understand how to access a clinic, right? They're accessing the clinic for them, right? The medications are now coming home, just like you have, Amazon and all of these people dropping the medicine at home. These people don't have to go and line up in a health center or go to a clinic and take taxi and go down spend a whole day to get a refill of prescription. It's coming to their homes, and all they have to do is to go on their phone and click a big app, almost like a little child if they're blind. So you see, it's these are the things that are happening. So we just have to now find out the champions that we have within our area. Rotary clubs exist. We have 24 Rotary clubs in Trinidad and Tobago. You understand? So once the ministers, they are also members of parliament. It's a lot of them. They can come back into the communities, engage the key stakeholders, and get the assistance for programs that are already going on. You don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. That's what I'm saying. They are going on. It's happening. You just have to now strengthen them, work with your key stakeholders, put in the KPIs, measure your performance, map. You have to do what is called vulnerability capacity assessment, right? You have to do VCAs. You have to go down now using the enumeration districts, and you can tell every single person living in a village, right? And when they die, the community emergency team that you set up, like in Cuba, they know that guy died yesterday. You see? So you have a touch, a pulse on the village. So you can even inform the village that the little river that you have next to it, like in Woodland, it has reached a mark where if that goes any higher, there's going to be flooding. So you don't wait until the flood starts to walk in. You have signals.
We get some feedback. From you.
Right. So this is where your community resilience has to be. The biggest part of this whole disaster risk management and flood management is not somebody dropping a sandbag for a community. It is someone actually saying that this flood has a 80% chance of happening. And then you send your key people, like your stakeholders, like your Rotary clubs and your Kiwanis and your Red Cross, and your people who come in with all these hampers and pampers, SEWA and everything coming after. Send them before. Let them go down to some of the people who are disabled, who have strokes, who are old persons living by themselves. These are the vulnerable people. And
so we need to get that logistics.
I'm saying, move their refrigerators, get their medical documents and put it up. Work with them before, because some of them, because of crime, they're not going to go to the shelters. So that culture has to change over time. You can't come and say, I'm going to put in a mandatory evacuation plan right now, because quite a lot of people are not going to leave their home. So what you have to do is you have what is called shelter in place, where you can say, look, are you with your neighbor? Your neighbor is good to you. Can your neighbor hold you because they have a higher home? Or could you say, well, look, you have Dr. Ramrup, that's your uncle. He's in Palmis. Do you want to go by him? Yes, you could go by him. And then you call the Minister of Defense and you say, well, look, you have the army under control. Could you send out, right, a battalion from, maybe down in San Fernando there? Could you let them now go that they are part of this whole emergency plan? And could they just go down and station themselves in key positions so that we don't have people coming in to take these people cow and jewelry after the flood comes? Yeah.
So, I mean, this is where definitely local government has to get engaged. We have to set a structure.
And the Ministry of Defense, I would have thought and I would have hoped that the ODPM would be with the Ministry of Defense, because the thing about it is that, I mean, although it's in a Homeland Security in the US, right, in Trinidad and Tobago, we don't have a National Guard. So what happened is that we have to use the military to support the ODPM, because the ODPM is a team of scientists.
In the bank.
Yeah, the team of scientists.
Suman, you gotta meet your phone.
Yeah. Am I okay? Yeah. So, yeah. So we have to.
Go ahead.
In the ODPM that I worked in, there was a standing order in which we worked very closely with the 1st Engineer Battalion at Komoto, right? So that the ODPM is really about 25 persons who are scientists, right? They are not persons to go and move gravel and take backhoes and go down and go into flooding. It was never that. They are the command and control, right, that coordinates the local government agencies, the 14 municipalities and Tima and Tobago, right? And they would work with them, right? With the coordination, they will monitor the thing 24/7 at a national operations center. So if something happens 2 o'clock when everybody else is sleeping, right, the agent from the ODPM, right, would stand up what is called the National Emergency Operations Center, which I told you yesterday was built by the US government, right? And that center would have, that NOC would have identified what went on with our divers. You see, because what happened is if you had an NOC that was operational, that would have been reported. Okay. And when that came there now, the beauty about the NOC is that you would have been able to look at bilateral and multilateral assistance, right? It doesn't take more than 3 or 4 hours to get a plane of Navy SEALs to come down from the US or whatever because of this bilateral.
But Puerto Rico, hour and a half is right there.
You know what I'm saying? So what it is that the whole system of the National Operations Center, right? The key surveillance, that 24-hour surveillance for every single incident of that nature, whether it's somebody coming in on a ship in the middle of the night in Point Lisas with malaria, right? To somebody coming in a vessel, right? With connection from London and JFK and coming into Trinidad via Barbados with a cough and a cold that looks very fishy, and the air hostesses reporting it to the pilot. And the pilot sends it back to the civil aviation, and the civil aviation reports it back to the NOC. And when that plane comes, instead of it going to the airport, they move it to the old airport, and the chief medical officer, who is our chief quarantine officer, quarantines that plane. You see, so this is basically why you need to have a national operations center.
So basically, you're telling me they shut it down. Is that what they did?
Basically, if you see, when you look at things happening over the last 10 years, if it was there in a different sort of operational management or mode. In other words, what a national operations center is, I'm a doctor, it's like a brain, right? Yesterday I put that analogy somewhere, and I said the National Operations Center, that when Gary Griffith was actually an advisor, we visited the National Operations Center, right, in Brazil, right? I visited the one at FEMA, where FEMA actually set up a 24-hour situational awareness due to our colleague, remember, from the embassy. She at that time, the military guy there was a guy, and he took me to FEMA, and I met with the director and everything, and we looked at the command center and the operations center, and we were able to give input into the formation of our NOC. So at our NOC, you have intelligence, SSA, you have the military and all the divisions of military, Coast Guard, Air Guard, the military, and what else? I think there's one other division. And then you have the police, of course, the intelligence of because police has intelligence as well, in addition to SSA, right? You have forensics, you have ODPM, and you have the civil aviation, all right, and you have I think there's one other person, 24/7. So what ODPM brings to the table is that they have 26 emergency service functions. You don't have to have energy there, you don't have to have health there, you don't have to have Red Cross or GMRTT or anybody there, because the ODPM now brings that public service, that public safety element into that NOC. So for example, when somebody has, and that's where a call center comes into, because we had started to set up the 911 as a one call center. What was happening is that we didn't have it organized at that. So we had a 511 center, which was a callback customer care center. So for example, if somebody saw the water coming up in their village and they call 511, which was the ODPM center, the 511 people will say, oh my God, okay, listen to me, right? You have to get ready, you have to do this, and they will call local government, they will call the DMUs. What's happening in this country right now, you have 14 numbers where somebody will have to call the DMU. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to get them because they're not emergency persons. You understand? And they have a vehicle. One of them, sometimes they have limited resources. What are they going to do? What are they going to come out and do? Stop the river from going up? So right and truly, what you need to have is a national operations center that looks at the whole picture. So that when you have to deploy resources, you can send a military here, you can send police here, you can send fire here, you can send a backhoe here, an excavator here. Right, you have to have an idea. You don't send an excavator because within the village there are people with excavators. So it means that the local government, disaster units have to organize stakeholders, MOUs and MOAs with local providers, pharmacies, ice providers. A lot of people forget that. When you have no current in an earthquake and you have to store dead bodies, when you have to store food, you need ice. You see, so a lot of the things that we take for granted, these are things that they have to set up, because this is what makes a community resilient. All of these MOUs
But
and
everything, Doc, everything can't be imported as Spain. We have to decentralize these things. Something has to be done Citrus, something has to be Toco, something has to be Mayaro, so
yeah.
that it's coming from different the response time. You're eliminating the delay, and and making it a little more swifter. The
I
military
remember,
has to
I
be spread out.
remember, I remember getting into problem with a minister of national security when they were getting rid of me in ODPM, because what happened? My contract was ending in 2017 April, well March, and what happened is that when the PNM came in power, what they did is they hired they hired they didn't interview anybody. They just sent in, if you remember, Colonel David Williams, right? And he was sent in as a deputy CEO. So what it did, and PNM likes to do that, for a whole year, what happened is that I had no role. I used to just sign papers. So they kept my contract, but I had no locus standi, right? All
Is
the
that the guy who
meetings,
said no biggie? The one
correct.
that says no biggie?
So what happened? I was just a CEO in name only, a CNO, right? And that's what they do. So you're relegated to nothing, right? And I remember there was a big problem in the North Coast where you had a lot of winds and it cut off, Matlot and everything from everybody else, right? And I was scolded, and they said, "Well, why it is you didn't have a warehouse, right, in Matlot?" And I indicated to them the science doesn't allow that. You see, it's not politically correct, but they wanted to have warehouses in all of these communities, right? But the science is not that. You have to develop stakeholder relationships with the hardware, with the groceries, with the pharmacies, right? With the backhoe operators, with the excavators. You don't go and store all of these in a warehouse, yeah, goods, because you're going to spoil. So, and what will happen is that the younger people, or even some of the crime people, will loot that warehouse, right? And the wheelchairs and the food and whatever might be sold to the people who need it most, or distributed elsewhere. You see? So there's a science in disaster risk management. And although it might be politically correct to have a warehouse, it is not feasible, especially the first thing that happens when you have a major disaster is looting. All right? That's what happens. So therefore, even now, we have an insurance, a contingency plan now for looting, where we expect there to be looting. So that if something happens in a major city, as you know, right, a lot of money in the ATMs or whatever, they have to write that off because it's going to be gone anyway. You see? So all of these are things that there were discussions on tables. We have scientists dealing with it. We have evidence-based analysis. There's a science behind disaster risk reduction. So when David Williams came in, obviously he didn't have a lot of science behind what he was doing. So that when he got literally he had to leave because he made some very poor comments about there's no such thing as a disaster. The country didn't like that. It was ill timing. He was correct in a way, but he was wrong. He was politically incorrect, and it was wrong to say that because people suffered. You see, he didn't understand what it meant and what a disaster the definition really is. You see, and then when he left, of course, we have the current guy who is there, and he took over without an interview. He just came in. He was appointed to continue, and that's where we are now. So a lot of the
I think they changed the guy. I forget the guy name that they changed, but General Smart is supposed to be there now.
What else I'm saying? So Rodney came in, right, and he was just sent. I mean, one of the things that we do in UNC as well, I mean, they did it in the last government, is that all the previous CEOs, they never went through an interview process. They were just sent there by the government, right? But what happened is that when I go now, new government, so what you have to do now, UNC, is you have to go now and set up an interview process. That takes 6 months. By the time you go through the whole process now, you're not going to put Ramrup there until another year because he has to go through now and get interviewed. Whereas they now, on the other hand, just as soon as somebody leaves, they just assign somebody and nobody says anything. You see, so this is where although we are in a new government and there's new government, it's a lot of the problems we have with the public service are going to remain, right? It's almost as PNM will remain in power, right, in those areas because in the public service, and there is some beautiful bureaucratic blocks. I mean, they do things so beautifully that you don't even know it's happening, right? And then the ministers get caught up in it because they begin to love the permanent secretaries and they begin to love the people and they want to do the right thing. So what you have now is you have these bureaucratic blocks now, which is stifling progress. So by the time you're ready now, you go into ODPM now in 2011, 1 year and a half after. right? And as I said, when was 2015 now, and they lost the election? From 2015 to when I left, everything was a block. So you lost 3 years. You know? So I do hope that some of these things could be improved. I hope some of the ministers would understand that there's a way to do things, and I'm sure you're going to do the right thing. They're going to do the right thing, and unfortunately, by doing some of the things that they're going to do, it's going to cause more harm sometimes. So they just have to put their foot down, change the legislation. ODPM's legislation has to change. That entity has to become an authority that reports to a board with proper legislation, reporting back to the permanent minister. Unless you don't do that, the ODPM can't engage anybody legally. It's a division. It's a cabinet minute that was provided, and a cabinet note, and that was when the late Patrick Manning's his wife, right, Hazel Manning, was the local government minister. They are the ones who brought up ODPM after the big tsunami of 2004, right? And that is what happened. ODPM was formed in 2005 from the original NEMA. That had more legislative authority than ODPM. Tobago House of Assembly, TIMA, has more legislative authority than ODPM. So that is when Franklin Khan, who the late Franklin Khan, when he became minister, and he was propagating, and he said it openly, that TIMA is more functional than ODPM. The reason why TIMA was more functional than ODPM, when they criticized me for saying that, I had no warehouses up there, and it's a scientific thing, not a political thing, right? Because people are going to lose the warehouses. I was sort of, buffed and thrown in a corner because those things were true. But the real fact about disaster risk management in Trinidad and Tobago, TIMA can actually call the police, call the fire, call any agency there, because they have the legislative authority under the Tobago House of Assembly to do so. ODPM cannot do that. They have to beg, You have to call and hug people and give them gifts and all of that thing for them to help. So that has to change. If you really want to manage flooding properly in this country, one of the things that you have to do very early is you have to look at the legislation. The Disaster Measures Act is outdated.
That's why I'm trying to get a jump on this thing, because I know if we don't do that, it's going to backfire on us, and we really need to put some structure in place here.
And there is draft model legislation, which I, as a director, when I was CEO, I became a director of SIDIMA, because we actually formed all the leaders of the disaster agencies around the Caribbean. We became, under the CARICOM agreement, we became directors. So what we did is we developed model legislation. We presented that model legislation at the time to the UNC government at the time, the People's Partnership. And we also indicated that there were 26 other pieces of legislation that had to be amended a little bit, to accommodate that legislation, because disaster risk reduction is a country-wide whole of government problem. So it's not going to just be one legislation. Things like customs, bringing in goods on the ports, and all of these things. We have one of the most strictest customs act in the world, right? And we have big problems during disasters when you have to bring in goods from other countries, and you have to be clear in that. That's one of the big problems we have in the Caribbean.
Your goods can rot on the port there. We have a history for that.
Yeah.
So
definitely. So Gary, there are scientific things that need to be the culture. For example, when you have problems in a country, a lot of people want to send their mattresses and their shoes and their clothing and all of those things, and half of the time it lands up in the ports there, and they have to throw it away, and it's actually has to be burned.
Better to send money. Money, because you don't have the resources.
So right. So what you have to understand is that if you have a problem in Pinal or Davie or whatever, there are people who sell water there. There are people who have groceries and pharmacies, right? And there are people who would have water in an agency in Port of Spain that could be flown with a helicopter if it's inaccessible. If an earthquake strikes Trinidad or the volcano erupts in Kikam, right, where the cables are bringing in all the broadband services into Trinidad, it happened before. You would have a loss of broadband signals in most of the country, right? And if you have no internet and no phone service because of an earthquake, for example, you have to have the ability for soldiers, right, to be flown into
satellite phones. Yeah, the leads have to have satellite phones.
Right, big on satellite. So what you do is you send the soldiers to key areas in communities, like schools we use, all right, and any sort of community center, so that when people get off of the rubble and they can creep out, right, and they can start getting movement with the local teams, and they go to the schools and they go to the shelters, and of course you have a soldier there who have a
Yeah,
certain
and then the CB radios, definitely needed. The walkie-talkies that they
right. So
definitely needed, because then you would lose the.
right. You have your REACT and your Trinidad and Tobago Amateur Radio Association. They are on board and they are with ODPM. They sit as one of the key emergency service functions at the ODPM. They are one of the people. Yeah.
One of the things that I was discussing, and and the Colonel came up with it, is that she wanted to create supply areas, but where it has to be guarded.
Yes.
That the dinghy, the necessary medical supplies, because you have to be able to pull these resources. I mean, you say put a warehouse and it will get looted, but it has to be guarded. I mean,
Yes.
otherwise, you just can't put a warehouse there. Maybe that's what I'm saying. If you decentralize the military and you break it up, from Komoto and from Chagaramas, and you have to you create some extra bases where you decentralize the military and the guard, and
Yeah.
then you put these.
When I went into ODPM, Gary, that concept is good. You have a for example, you have a battalion right up by the creek there, right on the hill by the hotel, right in south. You have other bases in Trinidad and Tobago. And the one at Komoto, the ODPM had supplies that they had purchased and they left it there, right, to store. So that would have been the warehouse within the camp, right? And when we went there, it was amazing. Everything was strewn in containers, right? Some were even stolen.
Yeah, you have them in containers and under lock and key.
So like it was a real problem with warehousing. Of course you had to have a central warehousing, but because of the nature of Trinidad, where you can't have security, right? And we have a big problem, as you know, with security. And
well, who got in the guard? I mean, that's one of the things that we have a problem with there.
So it is better. The science is better to have all the little parlors and groceries and whatever, that the local government have a relation with them. You know what we had to use? We couldn't get access. We had to use the fishermen. So we were able to take the fishermen from higher up, go across the coastline, and we were able to bring in gasoline for the generators. We were able to, bring in goods and whatever using the fishermen. So
I want to see those fishermen get communication devices, portable communication devices, the radios, so we can work with them when that time comes.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying like food stuff in the kind of warehouse, and I'm talking about the
things like flashlights, things like generators.
Yeah, those kind of things.
Those are things that we definitely need to warehouse. We need to definitely have it, right? I mean, I remember when we had the same problem in the east, right? There was a excavator that they were moving from the battalion, and it couldn't negotiate a bridge, right? But when we flew over with the helicopter, right, we saw excavators and backhoes very close to the area where we had the problem. You understand? So this is where the common sense and the logistics comes in. And I mean, that is what we're trying to say. There are certain things that you can definitely warehouse. What I had to do, Gary, is we had to hire, right, a company that had containers. And what we did with the containers is we sort of moved the containers, right, to certain areas, right? So that if there were a problem, I would move a container from Mayaro and bring it back into Rio, or move a container from Point Lisas, because certain areas have different risks. For example, on the container that was at Point Lisas, obviously we had more gas inhalation problems, right? So you would have more masks and all of these things, yeah? Compared to, for example, in Rio Claro, Mayaro, where you would have more things like backhoes and shovels and power hoses, and you know what I mean, right? Because you're looking at flooding and coastal surges and all sort of things, right?
and heavy industrial pumps. Right. They have them on mobile. Right. That some very large ones over here.
Yeah, we had water converters from seawater to fresh water, to potable water, right? So we had bladders, for example, where you can go to the sea and fill up some water, bring it to the machine on a pickup, and convert that seawater into potable water. Right. So, I mean, as I say, we brought it up to a very good level when I left there in 2017, right? And I'm not sure what exists now, because I haven't been there in 10 years. So I'm hoping that.
Maybe they looted just like the Cuba hospital.
Well, I always say every system in Trinidad is broken. Every system
So I don't
in
know what
Trinidad is
happened.
broken.
I'm not sure. I can't say. Maybe it's there and I don't know. It's one of those things.
So, man, do you want to add anything else?
No,
I want to continue this discussion as much as Dr. Rambu will be available. So we will move forward as as possible. And as often as we can get him. To get these advice documented.
no, the issues are very relevant. My opinion is in Trinidad is a systems problem, a systemic problem. The problem has to be with measurement and so on. It has to be how you're going to meet your targeted goals. It has to be strategic, your tactics you're going to employ. You have to be able to measure what you're doing, benchmark it against something, so that then you can only say, well, yes, I've improved the service here 10%. My goal next year is 25%. In my third year, it's another 10%. And in my fourth year, I should be 100%. So you have achieved your goal in a 4-year period. But unless these things are done, and all these, well, I don't want to say ministers, but the people start saying, oh, we're doing good, man, we're doing good. But what is good? Good relative to what? So unless you can measure these things, and all these things require systems, policies, human capital, human resources, and of course, good governance, you will achieve things. But unless these things are in congruency, they're in line with one another, we'll be hitting some, missing some, and at the end, before your wing, 5 years has gone. And as Doc rightly said, year 1 and year 5, you don't have to check. It was only year 2, 3, and 4 you could do things. And this is the problem. Now, if the population do not see, or you cannot convince them that you have done so much with whatever little you had, next time around, they have voted for you. And when you look at the data in the PNM versus the UNC, all PNM has to do is to get their people to go back and vote. That's 110,000 voters. You just get them out to go back and vote. And UNC is in the losing party again. So there's a very, very thin line to get back into power for a next 5-year term, unless you really deliver on your promises. And as I say, you only have 3 years to do that. Year 1, you could only clean some mess. You cannot clean all. Year 5, you cannot do nothing. So you have 3 years to do what you have to do.
Well, I want it properly documented and and in the face of the population. This is what I want. And listen, we voted, or the people of Trinidad and Tobago voted for an upgrade, and I supported for an upgrade. So I am definitely going to do everything I can to assist that upgrade from to take place. So that's my agenda.
It's how you do it, Gary. It's how you do it. You have to keep on.
Yeah, well, the how will come in with the technocrats like yourself and Dr. Rambup and whoever he can bring on board to support that, because I am saying we're giving them a fight. We're putting the information in their face,
Yes.
And let's take it from there. I am not going to sit down in a corner. I'm going to bring everything to the fight.
Correct. Correct. But
and we have to chastise. Listen, we have to send a clear message that we ain't taking. This is not the same old UNC. This is not the UNC that you could bully and threaten our prime minister and feel this is going to happen and we're going to tolerate that. So this is a different thing, different game here.
That's a good shared vision, but within this, you have to understand human behavior. Man. Human behavior, everybody wants to have their own little enclave, which they can, this is my
Yeah, yeah, I know.
jurisdiction. You have to live with that. And what happens if the person does not have the foresight like you or I or Dr. Ramif to take things forward? What happens?
But listen to me. I capsized some people's jurisdiction during the COVID fight, right? And they want to know who is this guy outside the Prime Minister office? Why you talking to he? Why you working with he? Then I get the Minister of Foreign Affairs to collaborate. And then they try to shut down the Minister of Foreign Affairs because Cho Chung have all the control. Well, guess what? I saw about that. I loop everybody into the email in the Ministry of National Security so they can't say didn't get the email because we had people sending writing for exemption for 6 months, 10 times, 25 times, 100 times, So listen, they deal with that different guy here, no, you know, and I want the upgrade. I fought for the upgrade. I supported for the upgrade. The only thing I didn't do was I couldn't vote, but I take this fight seriously, and I don't think I have to really tell too many people that, but I intend to bring the information forward, what we deal in, what the challenges are, and as soon as these ministers get organized, I'm going to invite them here to have a discussion too, because we had some of them here before, so definitely I intend, the channel is available and free of charge to use, so the idea is a suggestion, we're going to bring it forward, so with that, Dr. Ramrup, any last words?
No, as I said, I am hoping that we can communicate with some of our colleagues and some of our ministers. It's new. It's going to be a challenge for a lot of them in the next week or two to get
Yeah, they're
themselves
going to
sorted
need the
out.
help. They're going to need the help.
So I mean, I wouldn't mind, of course, giving advice and these and one of the things we have to let them know is that this is not personal opinions. These opinions are based on a scientific analysis of what is current or contemporary in the area, the subject matter that we're dealing with. In my case, is particular or specific to healthcare. I mean, orthopedic, of course, is the best thing, but I mean, of course, healthcare management, disaster risk reduction, and forensic and legal medicine. Those are my areas that I can provide contemporary evidence-based scientific assessment and opinions based on not what I think, but what I would have experienced as a young person growing up in Trinidad and Tobago from childhood, go right up, and certain things that I've seen, certain things that I have seen in the political, with my political experience with other people. I mean, I appeared for the for interviews when Pandey was there, and he said, "Young people come." As a young doctor, I went up to what is now the Radisson Hotel, and I went for interview, and Yetming and Pandey interviewed me, and I wasn't given an opportunity. I was going up in Aparima. And then I went up for San Fernando West, right? And I went up and Jolene John and Khadija and Peter Kanhai and David Lee and the Prime Minister. Well, the Prime Minister interviewed me. I wasn't chosen. It went to Sean Sobers. But I mean, I stuck there. I've been there. I mean, I have been there. I'm there. I'm not a I'm not. I didn't go into the politics in the last 3 years. I stayed as a subject matter expert, hoping to make ends meet because obviously I wasn't given a job. So yes, I would love to be able to share some of my knowledge, my opinion, and if they don't want it or they don't want to accept it, it's not a problem. At least you are giving us, Gary, the opportunity to share that, because I told you one of the things that I think that the PNM lost is because that inability of their ministers to engage with the public and from key stakeholders who would have these opinions, either because maybe the ex-prime minister Rowley didn't want them to do that, or they wanted to keep the messaging very streamlined and careful, and that you don't have ministers just saying what they want to willy-nilly and making promises that they can't keep. So maybe it was a method that they use, or a policy of their communication where they didn't engage. I mean, in the 10 years, I the only person who I could have spoken to on a WhatsApp a lot of times would have been Penny Beckles, who was my classmate at Jordan Hill Presbyterian, and maybe sometimes Amory would reply to me, Amory Brown, but that's it. I mean, nobody else in all my
Well, yeah, during the COVID, I had the best communication order. Amy Brown, he
yeah,
was willing, but he was
yeah,
restrained.
yeah.
You know,
So they couldn't do much. I mean, so I mean that Gary, one of the I made a point yesterday that yes, we can talk, we can make a lot of recommendations, but I am happy that you are able to engage with some of our colleagues, some of our friends in the ministry who are now ministers. And as I said, even if they can't come, and the parliamentary secretaries can help us and can meet with us and hear us and take back that messaging to them because they might be very busy. I think that is what the Honorable Prime Minister was hoping when she put a lot of the parliamentary secretaries in some of those ministries.
well, we giving them the chance. You know, we are
Yeah,
reasonable. We understand
yeah,
that it
yeah.
will take some time to organize themselves, but we want to
Give
give
them some
them
space.
the
Yeah,
right information.
correct.
So,
Yeah,
I mean, you know, because you have so much to do,
yeah,
you know, you may forget something. We're all human.
yeah,
So the necessary team to support you, you know, is here
yeah,
and fully equipped. You know, so we want them to understand that
yeah.
we're not here to overthrow anybody. We are here to provide the support.
Good. Yeah.
That's what it
Sure.
is about. And we should all try to pick the low-hanging fruits first. There are
Yeah.
some lot of them you can do just to appease the population that, hey, you know what? This government means business. They're starting to do things. And once you can see quantifiable results
Yeah.
and good
Well,
outcomes.
what I would like, Mr. Singh, Gary, if one of the first things that they have to do is to get that 911 emergency number going. Because this chart was created for disaster and emergencies. That's the name of the chart, and I think that one quick win, one thing that I would like to see is that somebody from Trinidad and Tobago, whether they be on a cruise ship, right, or a donkey cart or a boat, right, can pick up their cell phone, right, anytime, day or night, right, and send a text, right, or make a call to one number, 911, right? And that number, that person there who will sit behind there, can send you an ambulance. They can send you a TN-Tech truck. They can send you a fire services to get your cat or your dog from a tree, right? They can send you to evacuate a house of children that has a fire. You know what I mean? By just calling one number and not trying to
Mhm.
get 100 numbers to get people to come out. To
Yeah.
get bees out of your house, you have to look for agricultural number. You know what I mean? No, you call 911 and that number will take the dispatcher will then call the other numbers and let them call you, not the 911 operator. They would already have dispatched it to the relevant number. You see? So
Well,
And
I
that's how we
think
have it here in the States, right? That's how it
yeah,
works. You call
that's it. That's it.
911
And all
and
over
it's
in
routed to the
Singapore, in
area.
Brazil, in Canada. Oh my God! So we need to get that done fast. So if we have to lobby for anything and you want some quick wins, right? Let our people. You have a flood anyway, and you see that is how we begin to see how things are scaling up, right? So if you get 20 calls from one village, right, you know right away that there's a problem. You know what I mean? You
that's the
understand?
data. That is where the data analytics comes in. It tells you something serious is happening in that particular area.
Right away. So
Treat
you
with
know you
it.
can deploy resources, you see. All right. So that's something that
Yeah.
I will hope that we could push. It was on my list yesterday. I didn't really prioritize it, but I think Mr. Singh is saying that we have some quick wins. And if I were to ask the minister, right, of Home Affairs, right, that is one thing that he has to pull his
Homeland Security.
Homeland Security, that he needs to pull a team quickly. All right, ODPM can drive it with the National Operations Center, so that supporting communications in a disaster, you can never have the population being happy unless you can communicate with them, right? To and them communicating with you.
Well, we
So
have to
in
set up that
right.
infrastructure.
It's there already. It was there already. We already had the 911 center, right? We already have ambulances with I think it's 811. We already had ODPM had the 511. We have Tobago, TIMA has 211, right? And we have 14 municipal numbers. Everybody has a phone number. We have TN Tech has numbers. TSTT have numbers. So the infrastructure is there because you see, it wasn't to have a call center with all of these people together at all. right? It was ready to have one call center, right, 24/7, where people and operators will come in, and then they will take the call and dispatch it to police, fire, ODPM, who will bring in 26 other people. The ODPM is going to call fire. They're going to call TSTT and thing. The people, the operators don't have to call TSTT and thing. The ODPM call center would then call all the 14 municipalities. So one phone call or text from the person, and that triggers the whole response. That's what happens in the US. That's what happens in Canada. You see? It's there. The infrastructure is there. So this government now, they have to pull it together and say, okay, let's see where it is, and just start putting things in order.
Well, what I'm saying, it has to be expanded.
Yeah.
It may need some touching up, but
Definitely.
expand it to the part to where it's in the local vicinity of the municipality, and
Well,
so that the communication.
The call center is clouded, right? It just has to have an office. We had the office, and when Gary was here, Gary Griffith was in charge of the NOC when he was advising the Honorable Prime Minister. So we had the actual physical structure, and we had set up that 911 center. It was going to take over the whole call system. We had the 511 call center, which we had hired. They were Gillette and them had a company. So Gillette and them have a call center that is operational now 24/7. So they just added the ODPM responsibility at a charge, of course. And so therefore we had the A511. But what was happening at that time, because people were calling 511 and 211, you didn't have to call any of the 14 municipalities, because they would have been the Pinal Debe, the Tunapuna, whatever. You didn't have to call them. You just had to call 511. And the 511 operators would have called the Tunapuna and dispatched the assistance. Okay. So you don't have to be close to any one of those. You just have to be in your cloud. In fact, in some countries, the 911 center is in India. You know what I mean? They have call centers there. They have the people
back office.
Yeah. So it's basically, it's just how you operate it. And I mean, we're now talking about the Ministry of Public Administration and AI. So I mean, clearly, we talked about this yesterday. AI doesn't exist in one ministry. It's something that has to go right through, and that is where we're going to go. Yeah.
Interministerial, and AI has to be linked to the growth poles, and the growth poles and the human resources have to come within that AI subsidized ministry education, tertiary education, and also public admin. You cannot say public admin and AI, and they don't have no coordination among the other ministries or the other institutions. What's going to happen?
What I want to see is, we have a lot of educated graduates, and I want to see us engage them into this, into the structure, and see where they're at and what their interest is. But at least if they are interested, we want to let them know what the needs are, how the role they can play, and what this is about, and a good experience for them.
Yeah.
Gary,
guys, I have to go now. So, thanks very much. It was a pleasure. Always.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Dr. Ramrup. And if you have anything else to add tomorrow night during the week, I'm just saying during the week or whatever it is.
Once I'm available, and because I have Rotary meetings on Tuesdays, I have
Yeah. Like I said, whenever you have something that we can bring forward.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So we'll be in touch.
Once I see the link is put up and I can join.
But let's let me know if you're available. Like I said, if you think of anything that you want to bring forward.
Yes.
There's
so much.
Oh make a list. We're bringing it here. We're bringing it live and direct. I'm telling you, I'm serious. We're bringing it because this is the season. June is upon us. Rainy season is upon us. And this is something we have to beat it.
Like a little snippet of.
Make your list, man. Make your list. So we're gonna put it up. We're putting it up.
I think
everything you have to say.
A good approach would be like you can look at the manifesto. All right, and we can look at the elements of the manifesto that they are stated. That's almost like their strat plan, almost their business plan, and we can look at what are some of the things that we would like to maybe recommend as one of the things I told you is I saw stroke rehabilitation center, right? And I'm saying it shouldn't just be stroke rehabilitation center; it should be a rehabilitation system. Right, that needs to be upgraded. You understand that, right? And it's on their manifesto. So we can start saying, well, look, this is what you say that you want to do, but we think that it needs to be looked at. I'm looking at a community-based, people-centered approach where you
This is the
go,
structure that we think is how it should be
right.
built out.
You go to the community and you build their resilience, because when something happens, it doesn't happen in the hospital. They fall at home. And this fall at home reduces the ability of that man or woman to gain revenue for their family, right? It damages the family, all because they didn't have proper ramps, or they didn't understand how to use a pair of crutches, because in a busy hospital, right, they tell them go and buy crutches because they don't give crutches. You know what I mean? So all of these things are the small things that we have to do coming out of just that rehabilitation center. A rehabilitation system it brings all of that under that, so it's not a center where you go and you just say, okay, I'm going to rehabilitate stroke there and have about 25 stroke victims before they die. That's not what it should be. It should be where stroke victims can go home in their last stages and cry and grasp the hand of their relatives and smile, looking at them, and feel that warmth of their relatives at home before they pass, rather than having them in a cold center where people are just changing their pampers and watching the televisions at night, the soaps and whatever. You see, so this is what we're talking about.
The outcomes of it all. That is the measurement.
Make your list. Make your list. We're doing it. You want to give some demonstration, some stuff.
I am giving some pretty real analogies of not analogies, real facts of what is happening in this country.
Yes, please.
That little stroke thing. My mother got a stroke for 10 years, right? And she went to my brothers came from the US and they took her to New York because they thought she would get the best care there, right? Yes, she did. She got some speech therapy. But I went one day, I don't know what made me go from Canada and take a train and go down there. And I saw my mother in a room in a corner, right? With about 10 African Americans, right? All sitting down. This lady was in the corner alone. When I went down to check the book, my brothers there came like once a month or once a week to shave her. You understand? And I told my mother in all that stroke, Mom, you have to come home. You have to come home. And she gave so much trouble in that stroke state. I brought her home after a month of a lot of problems. I mean, we had family problems because of that move. But that lady came in my place here in Trinidad, and that lady grew. She looked at her relatives. She ate. She came down to me for every holiday, every day. I would keep her. We would hold her hands. She would smile, and she had a quality life after that 8 years.
So, but the thing about a stroke is that if you don't get the response in time, it causes more damage because every second counts with the brain, the blood flowing to the and blood and oxygen flowing to the brain. That, right?
But you understand I mean, you're talking to a doctor, so
the healthcare is critical.
Yeah, you understand the psychic component, right? Where somebody is going to die in a room, right? Eventually, and just get lost away without no family contact, to somebody who is at home.
Yeah,
and all you have to do is to rehabilitate and renovate and reconstruct the home so you can accommodate that life, in that room, that soul. So therefore, that is the people-centered care that our Honorable Prime Minister wants. So therefore, when you can create that in your communities, right? When you talk about stroke rehabilitation center in your manifesto, we want to make sure that our two doctors understand what we really need to have. It's not just a stroke rehabilitation center, but a rehabilitation system with all of these things in it, if you know what I mean. So that's what we need.
Yeah. That is exactly the point.
The physical care is essential.
Modifications of bathrooms and all these things come into play.
Ramps, drainage for your home so that it doesn't get flooded. Right, removing electrical appliances, making sure your washrooms allows you to sit down properly and you don't fall, because falls when you reach 60, 65, epidemiologically, statistically, right speaking, people are more susceptible to falls. It is the biggest epidemiological problem after the age of 65. That is a fact. It's not something that Dr. Ramrup has made up. You see, so these are things that you have to use the data. Use the facts, right? When they also had somebody was one of the doctors who is on this chat now. She said, well, we will build a burn center. You do not need to build right, a high level, tertiary level burn center for 1 or 2 bad burns in a country per year, because it's going to cost too much money to maintain just for 2 burns. You can stabilize that person in an ICU, any ICU. They have to live first, and then you can fly them to Miami or to a burn center, and they can stay there. But what we need is a burns ward. We need a proper burn system where people who have burns, ordinary, secondary, and tertiary burns, they can come and get proper treatment. So you spend more money in a more caring manner, dealing with more patients than just dealing with 1 or 2 patients that you could fly out. You see, so this is the science based on data.
Cost benefit too.
Yes. All right. So there's a lot of things to talk about. All right, we could talk about outsourcing. We could talk about a lot of healthcare systems thing. We have a lot of disaster risk reduction things. We talked about warehousing. We talked about logistics. So there are quite a lot. I mean, each day you can have a topic, and we could just go. We can just drive it through. It's amazing.
Right. So I understand clearly what you're saying there, Doc. I mean, that is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
Even in the best hospitals here in the U.S., the family visit, I had a situation. My wife got hit by a car here, and I was up in their faces, following up with the nurses and the doctors and things. So you have to remain, no matter how best they say the system is, you still have to follow up and follow through and
Yeah,
look
you have
after
to.
your relatives.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Right? And Trinidad has a bad way of restricting relatives. They're not taking care of the patient, and then they want to restrict the relative from not coming
Gary,
in. You're not
we
saying to
don't have
flood.
we don't have a retirement home. We don't have retirement homes in Trinidad, right? Our NIS now is grappling with the fact that people are living longer, right?
So
In
we,
other
we
words,
could
then,
provide the home care. We could look at something where we could provide the home care for the
so
relative in his
therefore,
house.
right? So you're now you're bringing the retirement by actually fixing his home, right, to accommodate his or her last few years,
Right. And this is jobs. This is
yeah,
jobs.
correct. So I mean, this is important, and you mention it in the manifesto. So all we have to do is to just show you how it can be done, so that in 5 years' time, when you go back to the elections, you could say, "This is what I have done for the common man. I didn't build a building, right, that the next government coming is not going to open for 10 years. I didn't build a university that is just there, right? What I did is I brought the university home." And I brought the hospital home, and people can now say that if you get a heart attack, I have a paramedic that will at least give me a few years to sort out my business. Right now, we don't have paramedics. That just one little thing can save 5 lives. Every life is precious. So these are the things that you can go on a podium and you can boast about at the end of this 5 years.
Quite right. Quite right. I agree 100% with you, Doc. That's the thing.
So with that, I would say good night, Doc, and thank you for taking the time. We will build on this.
Sure.
On this topic. It is something that is essential. We're going to bring everything live and direct to what we're talking about. You're going to bring it into life to those that we are trying to inform. We also want to educate the population on what we are trying to do and what we're talking about. It's not just the ministers. We want to bring a broad range understanding of what the objective is here. And put your notes together and let me know when you have the time, and we'll do it. We'll take it from there.
Yeah. What I would like to suggest to Gary, if you can, is that if you can liaise with the NATEX, right, and we can have what is called webinars. I'm sure Mr. Singh understands what I'm talking about, so that we can have a lot of maybe instead of having just this information, chats, where we can have like a session where your NATEX representatives on this would be able to bring other party members and even members of the family and public within this, so we can have an open discussion on some of the things that we are talking about. So that what happens is we have some education even coming out from this session, right, where you have more persons who are able to engage, right, and with the NATEX. So NATEX actually is able to feel, right, some of the conversations that we are having, because these are like lectures that we are talking about. It's not me saying things out of my head. It's very scientific. And what we're talking about, Mr. Singh, when you talked about AI and you're showing the apps that are easy to make. But what we need is It's just that we just need to rule it out properly. And to do that, it's a lot of people-centered engagement. And to do that, the ministers have to have their key stakeholders within their members of parliaments, where they, the MPs' offices, right? And all the stakeholders, they could actually go down into the communities and start doing these vulnerability capacity assessment, the VCAs, so they can now begin to understand more. And as a matter of fact, it might help a lot of those people in the marginal seats if you do the VCAs, so you can actually now go to people who really need the help, and you don't go there once a year when you're going to be chosen at a very late stage to represent that community. You can begin that engagement throughout the 5 years now in your marginal seats. You see?
So let's build out the structure, and what I said from our end, let's build out the structure of what we talking about. Organize yourself, and we will spell it out. I can have up to 6 person on the discussion here. Right. So I just want to let everyone know if they have an issue relating on something that they would like to discuss with us, to let us know, and we would organize for them to come on the discussion.
Sure.
This
Okay.
this is open to everybody. The channel is very open to bring in the information, to engage in your interests, and definitely we want to do that. So with that, Dr. Ramrup, and thank you very much, and good night, everybody.
Take care, Mr. C. Okay, take care, Gary. Thanks very much.
Take care.